you had already read the study and heard the numbers. Were you surprised at all?
A little bit, a little bit. The trend has been going towards people 35 and older using Facebook, and so the logical next group to catch on, I think, would be the next generation. So individuals in their late 20s and 30s and early 40s have been the largest growth the last couple of years. So now that they've established themselves within online social networking, it makes sense that now they're bringing in their parents and aunts and uncles, and it's becoming a family social network or extended family.
Why do you think that older adults would want to join Facebook or Twitter?
Well, I think you have to remember that it still is a social network, and people enjoy keeping those social connections alive. And once you realize how easy Facebook is and how it can connect with Twitter, it makes it much easier to keep in contact with family and grandchildren and photos and read blogs. And you really sometimes don't even have to make physical contact or connect with someone face to face to really know what's going on, to hear about trouble they're having, to hear about some of the celebrations, some of the great things they're doing, vacations. A lot of times family members are finding out where their daughters or sons are going on vacation because of Facebook and Twitter. So it's becoming really an interesting way to just stay connected.
How indicative is that of just where we're at in society as a whole?
I think some people fear that technology is taking away from the face-to-face, but we, a long time ago as a society, have divided up our families, and particularly this younger generation, they're moving away from home more and more and finding careers and establishing families. So I don't think it's causing anything. I just think it's becoming a tool for families that are not close or living in the same neighborhood or in the same state anymore. It's not a substitute for family reunions or family gatherings, but it's a way to communicate between those face-to-face opportunities.
So in a way, a lot of times these families they're going to be separated anyway, but this is kind of bringing them closer together.
I believe so. I think it's got a lot of potential to enrich relationships, to renew relationships with older relatives, great aunts, for instance, that you may have lost contact with over the years, and really start to reconnect with family through a social network.
You were talking about some of the technology getting in the way of this happening sooner. Do you want to talk about that a little more, just what's keeping the other 50% of people from diving into Facebook and Twitter?
Well, I think technology is probably one of the greatest generational divides that we're dealing with today. And not just the use of computers and mobile devices and things like that, but the software that's available online, and for example, software like Facebook. Facebook was designed for college students. It was marketed to college students, and those young people have had computers their entire lives. They've never had a time in school where they haven't had a computer, whereas older generations were introduced to computers at work. So it's a little bit more difficult for them to just catch on to the technology. So the divide with Facebook, technology-wise, has been really great. Some of it is also not just the technology of the generations, but the usefulness of something like Facebook. I think the older generation had to be convinced that it was something valuable, that it wasn't just a waste of time. It wasn't a place where young people were sharing too much information, inappropriate information, and getting themselves in trouble. Now that there is a entire generation of people in their 30s and 40s who are on Facebook, and they've been convinced that it really can be useful in many ways. They're now convincing an older generation.
Yeah, I could see that firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other observations that come to mind just about this topic in general? That
I think there, whenever you share information online, you need to be very, very careful. And my fear is that with individuals 35 and older, and particularly individuals 50 and over, they need to stop and think about how public Facebook is and how much they really want to share. Because there are real consequences that younger people have already been starting to deal with. Looking for a career, for instance, something you post online could prevent you from getting a job. Similarly, if you're in your 50s, especially with these economic times, something very innocent that you think is innocent online could jeopardize you keeping your job, especially when people are downsizing. There have been any behavior issue you have within a relationship, or any relationship issue you have face-to-face, can happen on Facebook, and it can be exaggerated on Facebook. Rumors can really take off on Facebook. There are 500 million people on Facebook if you open it up to the public. If you're in a network like Purdue's, there's close to 80,000 people in that network. So it's not private. It's very, very public. People need to think about what kind of content they're going to put on there, put a minimal amount of information to do what you need to do. So if you're going to connect with your family, you really don't need to put a lot of information out there. So resist the urge of putting too much personal information that could potentially be misunderstood and damage a relationship or hurt your career.
Seems like people are not afraid to say really mean things about people, like in their status or something.
Yeah, some of it is mean, some of it's inappropriate, but some of it is just too much information. For instance, I suggested to individuals that they probably shouldn't share their religion or their political views, unless they really feel so strongly about it that they want to do that. But those are things that could be used against them. And it may not be fair and it may not be legal, but you're giving that information to people and wondering why they're judging you or using it against you. You know, you really need to only put the minimal amount of information to do what you need to do to connect with your family and friends, and use it as a social network in a very positive way. I think older generations can also teach younger people or coach younger individuals on how to manage their image online. Very similar to how we teach young people how to deal with formal situations, or how to introduce themselves to their teachers or administrators in a college setting or a new employer. The online image is just as important, and it may be more damaging because it's so permanent and so public. But I like the idea that there are people 35 and 50 and over on Facebook, because they could have friends who are in their family who are younger, and they can coach them and teach them what is appropriate and what isn't. And people who are under 18 obviously need that kind of coaching.
Like if grandma's on Facebook and she sees some of your pictures and is like, well, I don't know if I would put those pictures up, something like that.
Yes, because when you post a picture or post a comment on Facebook, the context in which that picture was taken isn't there. So people will judge it at its face value. And sometimes it looks a lot worse to a casual observer than it really was. So it's always good to have an aunt or a cousin to be there to coach you and to give you advice on how it looks, and to tell you to delete it if it's not appropriate.